When reporters corner Melania Trump with an unexpected and controversial question about Barron, the room falls silent. Her poised but powerful response leaves everyone stunned, turning the press conference into an unforgettable moment. But what she says next sends shockwaves through the media. What was her answer, and how did it change everything? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The press conference room at Mar-a-Lago was packed, an electric current of anticipation buzzing through the air. The cameras flashed relentlessly, their harsh lights bouncing off the polished glass table where Melania Trump sat, poised and elegant as always. Her calm demeanor never faltered, but she knew this wasn't just another routine media engagement. This time, the stakes were far higher. The press had been circling for days, sniffing out controversy, crafting headlines before the truth could even be spoken. The question of Barron Trump's personal beliefs and values had become a wildfire, ignited by baseless speculation. Rumors had surfaced claiming that Barron had taken a stance on LGBTQ+ rights that directly conflicted with his family's traditional values. It was nothing more than media-fueled hearsay. But the damage had been done. Now they wanted answers. Seated behind the microphone, Melania adjusted the cuffs of her silk blazer, her face unreadable. The noise of the reporters, a chaotic mixture of murmurs and shuffling papers, was suddenly sliced by a sharp, bold voice. "Mrs. Trump, can you comment on rumors about Barron's supposed support for LGBTQ+ rights and how that aligns with your family's values?" The room fell into a heavy silence. Even the camera operators froze, lenses trained on her like snipers waiting for their target to make a move. It wasn't just the question itself. It was the intent behind it. Melania's grip on the table tightened, but only for a brief second. She would not be baited into a trap. She had faced hostile reporters before, had endured relentless attacks on her husband, herself, her marriage. But this was different. They were dragging her son into their agenda, into the ruthless world of political manipulation. And for that, she would not stand idly by. From the corner of the room, Barron Trump sat, flanked by 2 Secret Service agents. He had insisted on attending, even though Melania had cautioned against it. He didn't want to be shielded. He wanted to hear for himself how the media twisted narratives, how they used his name without his consent. Now, watching his mother from the shadows, he felt a surge of protectiveness and pride. Melania took a steady breath before speaking, her accent smooth but deliberate, each word chosen carefully. "Barron is 18, she began, her voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable weight. "And he carries himself with integrity, just as his father and I raised him to." Her gaze swept across the reporters, her confidence unwavering. "The truth is, our family stands united. We respect all individuals, but we hold firmly to our beliefs." The statement landed with a resounding impact, catching even the most cynical reporters off guard. It was not a dodge, nor an evasion. It was the truth. A murmur rippled through the press corps. They had expected defensiveness, perhaps a vague dismissal or an attempt to redirect. But Melania had disarmed them effortlessly, neither apologizing nor justifying, simply stating an undeniable fact. At the back of the room, Donald Trump stood watching, his arms folded. His expression was unreadable, but Melania felt his presence like a shield behind her. Their unspoken bond was stronger than any spoken words. Yet, even as she held her ground, she knew this was only the beginning. The press wouldn't let this go so easily. They would push, prod, and distort. And in the next moment, that push came. Another voice, sharper than the first, pierced through the momentary silence. "Mrs. Trump, doesn't this contradict your previous statements about respecting all views? Are you saying Barron's personal beliefs are secondary to your family's?" Melania's jaw tightened, though her expression remained smooth. So, this is what they wanted. A battle? Fine. She was ready for it. The air in the press room remained thick with tension, the weight of expectation pressing down on Melania Trump as she held the gaze of the journalist who had fired the latest question. Around her, the cameras clicked, microphones extended forward, as if trying to grab hold of her next words before they even left her lips. "Are you saying Barron's personal beliefs are secondary to your family?" A calculated question, crafted for controversy. Melania tilted her head slightly, the only indication that she was considering the weight of the words. But inside she felt something different, a slow, simmering protectiveness. These people didn't care about Barron. They didn't care about his opinions or his values. They cared about a headline. She wouldn't allow them to turn him into a tool for their agenda. In the back of the room, Barron Trump shifted slightly in his chair, his broad frame tense as he listened. He hated the way they spoke about him, as though he wasn't even present, like he was some faceless entity instead of a living, breathing individual. His mother had told him not to let their words get to him. But this felt personal. Melania exhaled through her nose, her expression remaining composed as she finally answered. "I am saying that as a mother, I know my son." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, a quiet fierceness that hadn't been there before. "Barron is strong-willed, independent, and capable of thinking for himself. If he has thoughts on any issue, it is because he has taken the time to form them, not because he has been told what to believe." The words landed like a carefully placed move in a chess game, leaving the reporters momentarily silent. But she wasn't done. "However," she continued, "what I will not allow is for the media to twist his silence into a statement or his private life into a spectacle." A few reporters exchanged glances, their pens momentarily pausing over their notebooks. She had struck at the core of the matter. The silence didn't last. Another voice broke through, sharp and unrelenting. "But doesn't that mean he should speak for himself? If he doesn't agree with your family's values, isn't it his right to say so?" Melania's eyes narrowed just slightly, but before she could respond, a sudden shift in the room's energy made every head turn toward the side entrance. The door swung open, and Donald Trump walked in. Gasps rippled through the room, and for the first time since the press conference began, the reporters were caught off guard. No one had expected him. He wasn't scheduled to be there. He wasn't even supposed to be in Mar-a-Lago at this moment. And yet, here he was. His towering presence filled the space immediately, his trademark confidence radiating from every step as he strode up to stand beside Melania. She didn't turn to look at him. She didn't have to. She could feel the way his energy shifted the room, the way his arrival sent a silent message. "This is my family. You do not come after them." Trump's gaze swept across the sea of reporters, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. Then he did something unexpected. Instead of taking the microphone from Melania, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. The gesture, small as it was, sent a powerful message. They were united. Only then did he speak. "Let me make one thing very clear." His voice boomed, his presence commanding immediate silence. "This family has been attacked, lied about, and slandered for years. And for years, we have stood strong." The words hung in the air, but Trump wasn't done. "But what I will not stand for, what I will never tolerate, is the media dragging my son into their agenda." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Trump's voice lowered slightly, but it lost none of its intensity. "Barron is a young man who respects all people, but just because he respects someone does not mean he has to agree with them." He turned his gaze toward the journalist who had asked the last question, his piercing eyes narrowing slightly. "Let's be honest here. You don't care about what Barron thinks. You care about twisting whatever answer he gives into something you can use." The reporter opened his mouth, but no words came out. Trump didn't let him recover. "We raised Barron with strong values: faith, family, and patriotism. He knows what he believes, and we respect that." Then, with a pointed finality, Trump delivered his last words on the matter. "So let's stop pretending that this is about rights or freedom of thought. This is about control, and my family does not bend to control." Silence. A long, drawn-out silence. The reporters sat frozen, their pens hovering over their notepads, their cameras rolling, but capturing nothing but tension. Trump leaned back slightly, his arms folding over his chest. Melania finally turned toward him, meeting his gaze for a brief, unspoken exchange. He had come not to overshadow her, but to stand beside her, and she loved him for it. Then, just as the silence became unbearable, a single clap echoed from the back of the room. A few more followed, and then, before anyone could stop it, the room erupted into applause. Not from the journalists, of course, but from staff members, from bystanders, from those in the room who had watched the media try to chip away at a mother and her son, only to see her stand unshaken, backed by the man who had built their family into what it was today. Melania felt a deep breath leave her chest, her shoulders easing just slightly as the moment settled. But she knew it wasn't over. This was only the beginning. As she looked past the sea of cameras and flashing lights, her gaze landed on Barron, still seated at the back of the room, watching her with an expression that was no longer just admiration, but determination. And in that moment, she knew he would not stay silent for much longer. The press conference had ended, but the storm it unleashed was only just beginning. Back at Mar-a-Lago, the tension in the air was palpable. The media frenzy had reached a fever pitch, with networks running non-stop coverage of the moment Donald Trump had walked in to defend Melania and, more importantly, their son. Melania sat at the head of the grand living room, her expression unreadable as she scrolled through the news coverage. Every headline, every pundit's analysis, every social media post dissected not only her words, but the meaning behind them. Trump family defends Barron. But is there more to the story? Melania speaks out, but critics say she dodged the question. Barron Trump silent or silenced? Her grip tightened on her phone. They weren't just attacking her anymore. They were coming for Barron. Across the room, Barron sat near the window, his tall frame stiff with frustration as he scrolled through his own phone, his jaw clenched. He had never cared much for the media's constant speculation, but this was different. They were painting him as a puppet, as if he had no agency, no voice of his own. He turned to face his mother. Why do they think they can speak for me? His voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it, one that Melania rarely heard from him. Melania set her phone down and studied him for a moment. There was a fire in his eyes, one she had seen before, but never so strongly. They believe that because you haven't spoken, she said carefully, they can decide your thoughts for you. Barron let out a quiet scoff. Then maybe it's time I say something. Melania felt her heart skip a beat. She had always shielded him from the media, always told him that silence was power, that the less they knew about him, the less they could twist his words. But now she wasn't so sure. Are you sure about this? A new voice chimed in. Both turned to see Donald Trump entering the room, his face serious, his expression unreadable. Barron stood straighter. I am? Donald studied his son for a long moment. He saw himself in him now more than ever. The defiance, the unwillingness to let others dictate the narrative. If you speak, Donald said, his voice steady, you can't take it back. Every word you say will be analyzed, twisted, and used against you. Are you ready for that? Barron met his father's gaze without hesitation. I'd rather have my words twisted than let them put words in my mouth. A beat of silence. Then Donald smirked, the look of a man who had just seen his son step into his own power. That's my boy. Melania, still uncertain, exhaled softly. She wasn't sure she was ready for this, but if Barron was, she would stand by him. Then we do it right, she said finally, on our terms. The following day, the Trump family issued a statement, short, direct, and designed to shift the conversation. Barron Trump will address the public in his own words, in a setting free from political spin. This will be a private and respectful engagement, focused on truth and values. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media. For years, Barron had been the most elusive figure in the Trump family. He had rarely spoken publicly, rarely been seen beyond official appearances. The mystery surrounding him had only fueled speculation. And now, he was about to break his silence. The night before his speech, Barron stood in his room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Not from his parents, not from the media, from himself. This wasn't just about defending his name. This was about showing the world who he really was, on his own terms. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Ivanka Trump. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. Barron nodded, surprised to see her. They had always been close in their own way, but she had never been the type to offer advice unless it truly mattered. Ivanka stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "You ready for tomorrow?" Barron exhaled. "I think so." She studied him for a moment, then offered a small smile. "You're doing something really brave, you know." Barron scoffed lightly. "I don't feel brave." "That's how you know you are," Ivanka said simply. "Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, even when you are." Barron looked at his sister, absorbing her words. Then, after a beat, he nodded. "I guess we'll find out tomorrow," he murmured. Ivanka smiled. "Yeah, we will." The press room was packed. Cameras were rolling, and Barron Trump was about to step into the spotlight. As he walked up to the podium, his tall frame commanded attention. The room fell silent. And then, he spoke. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began. His voice was deep, steady, unshaken. "I never wanted to be in the spotlight, but recent events have made it necessary for me to speak." The tension in the room tightened. Barron continued, his tone measured but firm. "I respect everyone's right to live as they choose, but I also believe in the values my family has taught me. Values rooted in faith, tradition, and love." He paused, letting his words settle. "The rumors about me are false," he said plainly. "I have never supported anything that goes against my family's beliefs, but that doesn't mean I don't care about people who think differently. Respect doesn't mean agreement. It means kindness." The entire room was still. For the first time, Barron Trump had spoken for himself, and the world was listening. Melania Trump stood backstage, watching with tears in her eyes. And beside her, Donald Trump smiled, a father's pride unmistakable. When Barron finished, the room erupted in applause. Not unanimous, but heartfelt. And as he stepped away from the podium, he felt something he hadn't expected. Not relief, not exhaustion, but peace. Because now, finally, the world knew exactly who he was. The moment Barron Trump stepped away from the podium, the world shifted. The applause in the press room was mixed. Some journalists clapped, others sat frozen, scrambling to process what had just happened. But outside, beyond the cameras, a firestorm had ignited. Within minutes, social media exploded. Barron Speaks was trending worldwide. Some praised his poise and honesty, while others accused the Trump family of orchestrating a PR stunt. News networks rushed to replay his words, their anchors dissecting his every sentence, every pause, every glance. Inside the Trump family's private suite at Mar-a-Lago, Melania, Donald, and Ivanka gathered around the television, watching the reaction unfold in real time. Barron stood in the corner, arms crossed, his face unreadable. He had just laid himself bare to the world, and now, all he could do was wait. Fox News praised his speech as a moment of rare authenticity, while CNN accused him of hiding behind carefully crafted words to avoid real controversy. Melania turned to Barron, her voice gentle yet firm. "You did well, my son, no matter what they say." Barron exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I just don't get it. I spoke from the heart, and still they find ways to twist it." Donald let out a scoff. "That's the media for you, kid. They don't care about what's real, they care about what sells." Ivanka, sitting nearby, scrolled through her phone, reading reactions from across the political spectrum. "It's not just the media," she murmured. "People are divided. Some are saying this was brave. Others think it was calculated." Barron let out a humorless laugh. "Calculated? I barely wanted to do this in the first place." Melania reached over and squeezed his hand. "The truth is always under attack, Barron. But you stood by yours. That is what matters." A sudden buzzing sound filled the room. Melania's phone was ringing. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It was Ivanka's private number. But Ivanka was sitting right beside her. Ivanka's brow furrowed, glancing down at her own phone in confusion. "That's not me." Melania hesitated for a split second before answering. "Hello?" There was a brief pause, then a deep, measured voice came through. "Mrs. Trump, this is Marcus Reed." The room went silent. Marcus Reed was one of the most well-known LGBTQ+ advocates in the country. A vocal critic of the Trump administration, he had spent years on television denouncing their policies, rallying against them. And now, he was calling. Melania's fingers tightened around the phone. "Mr. Reed," she said carefully, her Slovenian accent subtly thickening as it always did when she was on guard. "To what do we owe this unexpected call?" A small chuckle came from the other end. "Straight to the point. I like that." Melania didn't respond. Marcus sighed. "Look, I'll cut to the chase. I saw your son's speech, and I have to admit, I was impressed." Barron's head snapped up, eyes widening. Donald narrowed his gaze at the phone. "So, what? You calling to give us a participation trophy?" Marcus ignored the jab. "I don't agree with most of your politics, but I know sincerity when I see it. And Barron? He was sincere." Melania's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "And why does that matter to you?" Marcus was quiet for a beat. Then, "Because I think your son just did something neither side was expecting. He started a conversation that doesn't have to be a war." The weight of those words settled over the room. For so long, the media had painted battle lines, turning every issue into a war. But Barron's speech, delivered without malice, without arrogance, had shifted something. Melania glanced at her son. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered behind his eyes. She turned back to the phone. "And what do you suggest?" Marcus exhaled. "A meeting." Donald's brows shot up. "A meeting? With you?" He let out a scoff. "Yeah, I don't think so." Marcus's voice was unshaken. "Look, you can shut me down if you want, but you and I both know that your son is at the center of a bigger conversation now, one that's going to keep growing, whether you like it or not." Silence. Melania looked at Barron. "What do you think?" Barron hesitated. He had just wanted to set the record straight, not launch a national debate. But now, he had a choice. Stay silent, or take control of the conversation. He exhaled. "I'll think about it." That night, Barron lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. His words had set off a chain reaction, one he couldn't stop now. A soft knock sounded at his door. "Yeah." The door creaked open, and Melania stepped inside, her expression softer than usual. She walked over to his bed, sitting down beside him. "For years, I have tried to protect you from the spotlight," she murmured. "But today, I saw something different. You are not a child anymore." Barron turned his head, looking at her. "Mom, do you think I made a mistake?" Melania shook her head. "No, but I do think you are standing at a crossroads." Barron swallowed. "What if I don't know which way to go?" She reached over, brushing his hair back like she used to when he was younger. "Then you take your time. But no matter what you choose, we will stand with you." A lump formed in Barron's throat, but he pushed it down. He wasn't used to feeling this exposed. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. He had spoken, and the world had listened. Now, he had to decide what came next. The morning after Marcus Reed's unexpected call, the Trump family awoke to a new reality, one where Barron Trump was no longer just the private son of a former president, but a symbol. Whether he liked it or not, his words had ignited a fire that neither side had anticipated. The media frenzy had reached a fever pitch. Every major news outlet dissected his speech, and headlines screamed conflicting narratives. Barron Trump stands his ground. A young man of conviction, or political pawn. An expected grace. Even critics applaud Barron's speech on family and values. LGBTQ+ advocates split on Barron Trump's message. Is this a turning point? As Melania sat at the long mahogany dining table at Mar-a-Lago, scrolling through the endless coverage, she felt a mix of pride and apprehension. She had always fought to shield Barron from the public eye, but now the spotlight had found him, and it wasn't going away. Donald entered the room, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression tight with frustration. "I don't care what they say. Get them to retract that headline." His voice was sharp. "They're twisting his words." Hanging up, he turned to Melania, shaking his head. "CNN is trying to paint Barron as confused. Others say he's being manipulated by us. It's the same game they've always played." Melania sighed. "And yet, they are still talking." At that moment, Barron entered the room. He was taller than his father now, his presence commanding in a way that wasn't loud, but quietly powerful. He sat down across from them, his expression neutral, though the exhaustion in his eyes was evident. "I saw the headlines," he said simply. Donald scoffed. "They're vultures." Barron tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. "They're also an opportunity." Both his parents froze. "What do you mean?" Melania asked carefully. Barron exhaled, tapping his fingers against the table, thinking, "I never wanted this attention, but now that I have it, I don't want them controlling the narrative about me." Donald folded his arms. "So, what are you suggesting?" Barron hesitated before saying, "I want to meet with Marcus Reed." Silence. Donald's brow furrowed. "You're joking." Melania, however, was watching Barron closely. "You're serious about this?" Barron nodded. "I don't agree with him, and he doesn't agree with me. But he saw something in my speech, something even our critics admitted. If I meet with him, we take control of this conversation. We show people I'm not a puppet, and I don't fit into their simple labels." Donald ran a hand through his hair. "Son, I get what you're trying to do, but these people, they don't play fair." Barron's jaw tightened. "Then let's show them I do." Melania exchanged a glance with Donald. For all his fire and defiance, Donald had always been protective of his children, especially Barron. But now, looking at his son, he saw something he hadn't before, a leader in the making. After a long pause, Donald sighed, rubbing his chin. "All right, kid. If you're doing this, we do it on our terms." Melania turned to Barron. "This is your decision," she said softly. "But once you take this step, there is no going back." Barron took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "I know." Days later, in a private New York venue, Barron Trump and Marcus Reed sat across from each other in a quiet, secured room, away from the chaos of flashing cameras and screaming reporters. Melanie and Donald chose to stay behind. This was Barron's moment. Marcus was the first to speak. "I'll admit, I wasn't expecting you to agree to this." Barron met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't expecting you to call me." A small smirk played on Marcus's lips. Life is full of surprises. The air between them was thick with unspoken tensions. Not hostility, but the weight of what this moment meant. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Look, I'll be blunt. I've spent years fighting against your father's policies. I've been one of his biggest critics, and I'm not here to pretend we'll suddenly agree on everything." Barron nodded. "I'm not here for that either." Marcus studied him, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Then why are you here?" Barron exhaled, choosing his words carefully. "Because I wanted to show people that we don't have to agree on everything to still talk to each other." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Fair enough." Barron continued. "I'm not going to change who I am, and I'm not going to let the media decide who I am either." A flicker of respect crossed Marcus's face. "You've got more backbone than I expected." Barron smirked. "I get that a lot." For the first time in the conversation, Marcus chuckled. "Yeah, I bet you do." They spoke for over an hour, discussing family, values, and the media's obsession with division. Neither tried to change the other's mind. But in that small, quiet room, a moment of understanding passed between them. And when they left, The cameras outside exploded with flashes. Reporters screamed questions. What did you talk about? Was this a political stunt? Are you making a statement, Barron? Barron paused at the top of the steps, Marcus standing beside him. Then, Barron Trump did something unexpected. He turned to Marcus and extended his hand. For a brief second, the world stood still. Marcus looked at Barron, then at the hundreds of cameras flashing around them. Slowly, he reached out and shook Barron's hand. The headlines wrote themselves. Barron Trump and Marcus Reed, a conversation, not a battle. Bridging the divide, a surprising meeting between two opposing worlds. Barron Trump breaks the mold, refuses to be a pawn in political games. The internet exploded, but this time, for a different reason. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about something more. That night, back at Mar-a-Lago, Melania watched the news coverage with a rare sense of hope. Donald, arms crossed, shook his head with a small smirk. The kid's got guts. Melania turned to Barron, who stood silently, watching his own image on the screen. You took control of your story, she murmured. Barron exhaled. Yeah. He turned to his mother, a small but real smile on his lips. And I'm just getting started. The moment Barron Trump and Marcus Reed shook hands, the world paused. Just for a moment. The press conference hadn't even been planned. The meeting was meant to be private. A quiet discussion between two individuals from opposing sides of the cultural and political divide. And yet, somehow, Barron had known the cameras would be there. The image went viral. Within hours, social media erupted. News anchors debated the implications of Barron's bold move. Some called it a new era of dialogue, while others dismissed it as an empty gesture. But no one could ignore the fact that, for the first time in years, two people with starkly different beliefs had managed to have a conversation without shouting at each other. Melania Trump watched from the living room of Mar-a-Lago, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping her phone as she scrolled through the reactions. Some were overwhelmingly positive. Barron Trump just did something most adults can't. He talked to someone who doesn't think like him. Regardless of where you stand, this young man is proving he isn't just a shadow of his father. Marcus Reed and Barron Trump, a conversation, not a battle. Maybe there's hope after all. But then there were the others. He's being used as a pawn. Why is Barron trying to act like some great unifier? No one cares. His father taught him well. Pretend to be respectful while secretly pushing an agenda. Melania's grip on the phone tightened. She had expected this. No matter what Barron did, people would find a way to twist it. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Donald Trump walked into the room, adjusting the cuffs of his suit. He was fresh from a round of private meetings, likely strategizing with his advisors on how to handle the storm that Barron had just created. Have you seen the latest? He asked. Melania nodded. I have. Donald let out a short chuckle, shaking his head. They're losing their minds. He glanced at her, eyes sharp. But I'll give it to the kid. That was one hell of a move. Melania sighed, setting her phone down. Do you think it was the right one? Donald scoffed. Doesn't matter. It happened. He crossed his arms. What matters now is how we respond. A soft knock at the doorway interrupted them. Barron stood there, his expression unreadable. May I come in? He asked. Melania gave him a small nod, and he stepped inside, his tall frame casting a shadow over the room. He was still dressed in the suit he had worn to the meeting, though the top button was undone, his tie loosened, a sign that the weight of the day had started to settle on him. I saw the reactions, Barron said, his voice even. It's about what I expected. Donald studied him, and Barron hesitated, then exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. I don't care what they say about me, he admitted. But I don't want this to hurt you or Mom. Melania stood, crossing the room to place a hand on his arm. Barron, you are not hurting us. You did something very few people could. Donald smirked. I'll tell you something, kid. You just threw a wrench into the entire media machine, he chuckled. Half of them don't know whether to praise you or attack you. Barron looked between his parents. "Then what do we do now?" Melania and Donald exchanged a glance. It was a simple question, but the answer would shape everything that came next. Predictably, not everyone saw Barron's actions as a sign of progress. The next morning, a prominent journalist released a hit piece questioning Barron's true motives. The headline read, "Is Barron Trump really breaking from his family, or is this just another PR stunt?" Cable news picked up the story within hours. One anchor scoffed, "He's just following his father's tactics. Appear civil, but never actually compromise." Another journalist went even further. "This is all an elaborate attempt to make the Trump name more palatable to younger voters." Melania felt her anger stir as she watched the coverage. Barron, however, didn't seem fazed. Instead, he sat quietly at the dining table, scrolling through his phone, taking in every headline, every comment. Donald, standing nearby, let out an exasperated sigh. "This is exactly why I never played nice with these people. Give them an inch, they take a mile." Barron set his phone down. "I knew they'd do this," he said, his voice calm. "I just didn't think they'd move this fast." Melania studied her son carefully. "And how do you want to respond?" Barron met her gaze. "I don't." Donald blinked. "What?" Barron leaned forward, his hands clasped. "If I say something now, it'll just fuel their fire. They want me to get defensive. They want me to explain myself. But I don't owe them that." Donald raised a brow, nodding slightly. "Huh, smart." Melania smiled softly. "You're learning." Over the next week, something unexpected happened. Despite the media's best efforts to undermine Barron's actions, the public wasn't buying it. People saw the constant attacks and started asking, why are they so afraid of a teenager speaking his mind? Even some high-profile commentators who were no fans of the Trump family began calling out the blatant bias. One tweet went viral. "Say what you want about the Trumps, but attacking an 18-year-old for simply expressing his beliefs is a new low. Let the kid speak." Another commentator added, "Whether you love him or hate him, Barron Trump just showed more class than most career politicians. Let's give credit where it's due." Support for Barron grew. People admired his measured approach. They respected that he wasn't playing into the media's games. And in the midst of it all, Marcus Reed made another statement. In a surprising interview, he defended Barron's right to express himself without being vilified. "I don't agree with him on a lot of things," Marcus admitted, "but what I do respect is that he came to the table with honesty. That's something we should all be willing to do." Melania watched the interview with tears in her eyes. Donald, standing behind her, smirked. "Looks like you got through to at least one of them, kid." Barron nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he murmured. Melania turned to him. "No," she agreed, "it's just beginning." Barron Trump had just changed the game, and the world was watching. Barron Trump stood at the threshold of something far bigger than himself. What had started as a simple press conference, meant to be a defense of his family, had spiraled into a national debate. He had become the center of a storm he never asked for, a symbol of something far greater than he could have imagined. But now, as the dust settled, a new question loomed over him. What comes next? The media had tried to discredit him. They had thrown accusations, twisted his words, and questioned his intentions. And yet, despite their efforts, something unexpected had happened. People weren't mocking him anymore. They were listening. The night before his highly anticipated public statement, Barron sat alone in the garden of Mar-a-Lago, his phone in his lap. The world was waiting to hear from him. His parents had given their advice, his mother's voice calm and reassuring, his father's words sharp and strategic. Even Ivanka had called, offering her wisdom. But in the end, this had to come from him. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus Reed. "They're waiting for you, but don't speak for them, speak for yourself." Barron exhaled, gripping the phone tightly. He had made his decision. Tomorrow the world would hear the real Barron Trump. The next morning, the Trump family gathered in a private suite within Mar-a-Lago, watching the news unfold. The anticipation was palpable. Every major network was broadcasting his upcoming speech. The headlines had shifted from criticism to curiosity. Barron Trump to address the nation, a moment of clarity or damage control. The youngest Trump finally speaks. Will it change the narrative? The next generation of the Trump legacy, what will Barron say? As millions tuned in, Barron took a final breath, straightened his tie, and walked toward the podium. The moment he stepped on stage, the room fell silent. Cameras flashed, reporters braced for impact, even his harshest critics leaned in, ready to dissect every word. Then, he spoke. For the past few weeks I've been called many things. A pawn, a puppet, a PR stunt. But I stand before you today to say this. Barron took a measured pause, scanning the audience. I am none of those things. The room stiffened. No one had expected him to be so direct. I never wanted the spotlight. I never sought to be a symbol. But when my name is used to push narratives that are false, when my character is questioned by people who don't even know me, I have to respond. He adjusted his stance, looking straight into the cameras. I respect people who think differently than me. I believe in kindness, in conversation, in finding common ground where we can. But I will not apologize for who I am. I was raised to stand firm in my values, to respect others without compromising what I believe in. That is what my family has taught me, and that is what I will always live by. A few gasps rippled through the room. The media had expected a defensive statement, maybe even an attempt to soften his family's reputation. Instead, Barron Trump was standing his ground. I am not here to pick a side in your culture war. I am not here to be your headline or your controversy of the week. I am simply here to tell the truth. And the truth is this. No matter who you are, what you believe, or where you stand, respect should go both ways. If we can't have conversations without tearing each other apart, then we've already lost. Melania Trump, watching from the sidelines, felt her heart swell with pride. Donald Trump, arms crossed, gave a small nod. That's my son. The press room remained silent. Not a single interruption, not a single shouted question. Because for once they were actually listening. As soon as the speech ended, the reaction was immediate. News anchors scrambled to respond, their prepared talking points suddenly useless. Social media exploded, with people from all sides reacting. Whether you like him or not, you have to admit Barron Trump just handled that with more grace than most politicians. The media tried to tear him down, and he refused to break. Respect. If you expected a weak, coached response, you got the opposite. Even his critics were struggling to find an angle of attack. One well-known journalist sighed on live TV. I have to admit, the kid held his own, and I didn't expect that. The most unexpected moment came later that night, when Marcus Reed took to social media. What Barron Trump did today took guts. We don't agree on much, but he deserves respect for standing up for himself. Maybe this is the start of something new. Maybe this is the conversation we should all be having. That single message sent shockwaves through the political world. The battle lines blurred. People who had once seen Barron as just another Trump were reconsidering. This was no longer about politics. This was about integrity. Back at Mar-a-Lago, Barron sat with his parents in the dimly lit family lounge. Donald Trump poured himself a drink, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up. You surprised a lot of people today, kid. Barron smirked. That was the point. Melania took his hand, squeezing it gently. You showed them who you really are, Barron, and they saw you. Barron exhaled, feeling the weight lift from his chest. I just wanted them to know I'm not a pawn. Donald chuckled. Oh, they know now. Melania kissed the top of her son's head. And no matter what happens next, we will always stand by you. Barron leaned back into the couch, the tension finally easing from his shoulders. The world would keep talking, the headlines would keep coming, the attacks wouldn't stop overnight. But for the first time in his life, he felt something deeper than relief. He felt free. And as his father poured another drink, as his mother sat beside him, as the world continued to react to his defining moment, Barron Trump knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Barron Trump's story is more than just a response to media scrutiny. It is a powerful lesson in resilience, integrity, and standing firm in one's beliefs. In a world where narratives are often shaped by headlines, Barron chose to speak for himself, refusing to be a pawn in political battles. His journey reminds us that true strength lies in knowing who you are and not letting others define you. This story is a testament to family unity, courage, and the power of truth in the face of adversity. It challenges all of us to engage in respectful conversations, to listen rather than attack, and to recognize that respect must go both ways. If this inspiring story resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others. Let's continue to celebrate integrity, courage, and the strength of standing up for what is right.